Major funding for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle-market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant Health, including Presbyterian in Charlotte and Forsyth in Winston-Salem, are affiliate heart hospitals of the Cleveland Clinic, consistently ranked #1 in the nation for heart care. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, proudly serving South Carolinians since 1946. And by Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
In city government, mayors and city council get all of the press and much of the credit for the ongoing operations and even strategic vision for any urban center. But if you take time to notice, it doesn't take having a background in civics to see that city staff, more pointedly, city managers, carry much of the responsibility of a community's success and its failure. This is the most widely watched program on Carolina business and public policy, and I'm Chris William. Thank you for watching. This time on CBR, the city managers from Spartanburg, Charlotte, and Aiken. How do they plan? How do they manage and look ahead, especially given the higher pitch of political acrimony? We begin in just a moment.
Major funding also by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded August 10th, 2012. On this week's program, Ed Memmott of the city of Spartanburg, Richard Pearce of the city of Aiken, and Curt Walton of the city of Charlotte. Now, Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program. Gentlemen, welcome, and glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Curt, I'm going to start with you because you're closest, and also, for a lot of reasons, you know, we've all kind of heard and read and talked about the economy and how it's been a very long and slow and shallow recovery here. Curt, over the last 3.5 or 4 years, since 2008, actually 2009, 10, and 11, you know, was there ever a moment, were there ever times where you're thinking, you know, Charlotte, it's a big community, but, you know, we're not close to the edge, but we could get into trouble here if tax receipts fall much more? Was there ever a moment when you and your staff were going through the planning of maybe a different scenario?
Only in 2008 when Wachovia was bought, and we didn't know at that point the degree to which that would impact Charlotte. Because Wachovia was such a major employer, such a civic leader, and so many employees that would affect the real estate market. We never really saw the financial impact of that on the property tax side, but from the community perspective and the overall health of the community, that was the point at which I was most concerned.
So it was really more about the unknown,
exactly.
The impact. Subsequently, not long after that, Bank of America started going through some issues. I mean, was that a piling on effect for you?
It was definitely a compounding effect because, again, of the employment situation. And in our center city, the very center city of Charlotte makes up about 12% of the property value of Mecklenburg County. And so in that several block radius is a huge impact on our taxes. And so we were concerned. We knew that we both have a presence here because the investments were too great to walk away from. But whether it was going to be similar to what it had been in the past, we just didn't know.
You know, Ed, I'm going to skip over you just a second, and I want to go right to you, Richard, especially down in Aiken. In North Augusta, in that whole part of the state in South Carolina, Savannah Riverside at one point had 20,000+ workers, government, exactly contract. Right. I mean, you name it. What a big impact in a town like Aiken. And now they're down to about 11,000 with the plan of actually winding themselves out of business. So back to Curt's question about the kind of the impact of not just a major employer, but the resources that they all bring. How at Aiken do you plan for something like that?
Well, I actually grew up in North Augusta, so I was in a neighborhood where the carpools went out to the Savannah River plant in the 60s. Aiken is an unusual community in the sense that we have consistently planned for the future and consistently planned that the Savannah River plant wouldn't always be there. And I think the residents there and many of the workers would take exception with winding themselves out of business. They'll tell you that they're looking for alternative missions. And of course, they have a strategic plan. And we knew back in the 1980s with the initial reduction in force when they changed contractors at the site that the city could not depend on those federal dollars as they had in the past. So we engaged in a strategic planning program. Mm-hmm. And I think it served the community very well. We're quite fortunate to have a good cooperative effort in our community that resulted in the largest economic development project announcement in the history of the state of South Carolina, which was the Bridgestone plant expansion and the new tire production facility that combined was over $1.2 billion in investment, 850 jobs for our area.
And we might come back to that. Ed, let's go to you. Last 2 or 3 years, any issues where you thought, you know, Spartanburg's in trouble here?
Well, we never got to the point where we were alarmed. I think it made us all apply more rigor in our assumptions related to the future and look and to see what our operational costs, what our recurring revenue costs are, project those, look long term to see if there are any other unanticipated events that could happen to trigger. Spartanburg was fortunate to have been well managed with good political leadership and good management. So there were we didn't get on the verge of anything that was a catastrophe or anything. But we certainly had to go back and look again at what our operational expenses are. How can we make those more efficient? Continue to provide a high quality of service, gain efficiencies where we can, and make sure that we're looking to leverage every other dollar in investment that we can to support the local economy.
And you know, let's stay on this line. You all are essentially the chief operational officers for the cities that you sit in, and you're at that interface between the politicos, the mayor, the city councils, and then you're not just your staff, but you've got all of the citizens that are your constituents, and you have to have. And I hope I'm not putting any words in your mouth, but I mean, you have to have a realistic expectation going forward based on what has happened, not just in the economy, but now this whole temperance and this tone around the political issue that we find ourselves in and how people don't get along politically. So I guess how do you go forward, Curt? How do you say, and you just presented a plan in Charlotte of almost $1 billion that did not pass, and we'll talk about that too. But I mean, how has your thought process changed now than it did maybe 4 or 5 years ago?
Well, you have to be aware of the tenor of the community and the things that are the dynamics in the community. But at the same time, we're charged with responsibility to recommend what we think in our professional judgment is the best thing for the community. And that may be something that is politically very unpopular. But I think the consequence of not doing that is you may have another unintended consequence that would be equally unpopular if we didn't speak up and recommend what we thought was best. So we can't really let the polls or the rhetoric dictate how we're going to respond to our obligations to recommend what we think is the most important thing to do.
So how do you hold that line?
Well, I think you have to be very transparent, frankly. And as I mentioned,
I'm sorry, Richard, but how do you take the heat from the city council and the mayor when you know that's not the best course of action, and here's the reason why? You don't always get political cover because the politicos get political cover. So how do you hold the line to know that, we need this tax increase because we have to make this forward-looking investment? How do you do that?
Well, and Chris, I think you're on it. It's the facts of the situation. As a city manager, I see my job, as you say, as an operations person, implementing the policy that the politicos put in place. That means I want them to make an informed decision. So rather than say yes or no, we try to give our counsel, and certainly there are the circumstances of a yes and no decision, but in that decision we try to give choices along the way, and that's how the strategic planning has helped us, plus the fact that we kind of pay as we go at the city of Aiken. we have reserves that if we didn't get another dime in today, we could literally operate for another 5 or 6 months. Of course, the other part of that is we purchase a police car. Experienced modifiers tell us that police car is going to wear out in 2 or 3 years. So we buy the car, we immediately put the money back for the next car in the annual budget. So that's money, the money's there when we need it.
So sorry, let me stay with you. So you've had 20 plus years of no millage increase at all?
That's exactly right. In fact, we've reduced our millage.
How have you made that up? The fact that you've not increased, I mean, so where do you get, how do you raise your revenue?
That's a question we do get. I mean, we have a business license tax for sure. We have a property tax. We have user fees. And what we've tried to do is not penalize businesses and home ownership. Aiken City Council implemented the business license tax in 1938. I mean, it was the height of the Great Depression. And I think we've had a good relationship with our business community that as long as they know, all right, if I pay this, I get this service, I get this amenity, that kind of nexus for our citizens has resulted in their willingness to support it.
Ed?
I'll give you 2 examples. We were looking at significant liabilities associated with the stormwater infrastructure that belongs to the city. And it was not a question of if we were going to experience those liabilities and pay those costs. It was how did council want to be in a position to pay those? They want to consider taxes. They want to consider fees, a user fee to associate with that. So we presented what those future liabilities would be, the condition of our system, and gave council choices and the implications of those various choices. If we went with taxes, if they were going to fund those costs based on taxes, it would not include the nonprofit community that's out. And so council went through that. So we gave very factual information, our best assessment as management of what it was, and then let the policymaking body, the elected council, make the decision that they need to make. So that in that case, that was how we approached. We have a similar example with a legacy pension plan. The city no longer, current employees are under the state retirement system, but there is a plan that we have that was closed to city employees that had an opportunity in 1990. We still have a liability associated with that plan. We had to lay that liability out in front of council, show what it would be over the long term, over the next 40 years, show what assets were available in that against that liability, and what the choices that council had. If they elected chose not to increase funding associated with that liability, these are the potential risks associated with that course of action. Again, they had to weigh those choices of increasing funding in what were difficult times now, so that in 10, 15 years, they were not faced with more difficult decisions. So again, I think our responsibility is to be very upfront with council. My job is to bring good news or bad news, depending on what the circumstance.
Yeah.
But I can't fail to not bring them the bad news. And that's are the potentially bad news. And so that's the approach that we've taken in Spartanburg.
You know, you're all kind of nodding with the good news, bad news thing. Anything, what rings true with you on that?
Well, that's really what we went through with the capital budget this spring, because there was good news, bad news. And the good news, I thought, was that we had developed a plan that really would have changed the dynamics of the city from a financial perspective, an investment perspective. But the noise surrounding just really made it unworkable in the end.
Will you have another chance to present that plan?
Yes, I don't know in what time frame or in what form, but there's some discussion about going ahead maybe as early as September, October, and starting that process again. It may be 2 years, I don't know. So it will come back in some form, but I don't know when. Is
there, and this is with all your communities and with some of your counterparts that you speak of in you know, the managers' meetings in South Carolina and in North Carolina, Curt, is there some tipping point that if we don't get serious about making capital investment, if we don't figure it out and break through the den of everyone is tax weary and everyone is political weary, But at what point is it going to be, it's late, but at what point is it going to be too late for us to make some serious capital investment? You were talking about the infrastructure, water and sewer. You had to do it.
Right.
Was it at a point, was it the 11th hour, Ed, and you were running out of time?
It was certainly a situation where there were immediate needs associated with the system that we needed to be in a better position to manage. But it was a more series of intermediate needs when I refer to intermediate 7 to 10 years out, that we could see that with the aging of the facility, that there's no question that those liabilities are going to come due. We're going to have to pay and make those happen. It's a balancing act between making those future investments in what you need to leverage and create a different model of economic growth, revenue streams, with those immediate needs that you also see. So that's part of the balancing act, and offering an assessment of what the different courses of action that an elected body may ultimately choose. Try to give them the best information that we have, and make certain they're aware of those choices that we're asking them to make.
How do you all deal with the political acrimony that's been going on? I mean, you see it from a different point of view. How do you deal with it? Clearly, on the national stage, we've come to expect the kind of finger pointing, the kind of name calling, just the kind of meanness that goes on in candidates and political campaigns. But it seems like it's gotten worse. Has it gotten worse on the local level?
I think the local level is just more accessible, Chris. So we're a convenient target. When I first took this job and went through some of those initial meetings where we had a full council chamber and some of the activity that you're describing, I would go back downstairs to my office when the meeting was done and just check my shirt to make sure it didn't say Oscar Mayer on it, But I think folks are very put out with government, and our area chambers travel to Washington, D.C. with the Savannah River site in our area, along with the Fort Gordon Army base there, the medical hospital there, and NNSA has their facility there, and NSA is there. So, we try to go, again, as a united front to meet with the people in Washington, and you go up to a very beautiful city and go into some very lavish offices, and the word you get is, well, we're just not going to do anything until November. Well, that's discouraging to us as local leaders, and I think, both states have had some challenging issues that have gone through the state legislature. We're lucky in South Carolina, particularly talking about these capital projects, where the citizens really have a voice. It's the 1 cent sales tax, and we literally have a list of the capital projects that we will do with the penny. So the city of North Augusta is the other larger city in Aiken County, city of Aiken, and then Aiken County, together with the smaller cities, have a ballot sheet, and it's a yes or no vote. So the citizens have a voice. So these issues like infrastructure that you're talking about, they can participate in a very real way and have done so.
So where is, let me put it this way. In Atlanta recently, the citizens of Atlanta voted down a tax increase, which kept them from getting about $8 billion in transport. You all know it. I mean, several $billion of really needed transportation and transit money from the federal government. Curt, how do you, with your almost $1 billion plan of capital investment, it's got to be frustrating to see that not go somewhere. But I guess the question to the Atlanta thing, do we not understand what's going on here? Is that it? So when Charlotte City Council votes down the plan because of political infighting or whatever you say, is there something that citizens should be looking at differently? I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, but how can we make sure we're making the capital investment?
In my opinion, one of the things that's been lost is the public good. And because of
lost in the public dialogue, or when it's debated among city council?
More in the public dialogue, yeah. I think. I don't see it as much in the elected officials. But because of the economy, we've all gotten focused on our own finances. And that's kind of trickled up to government. And government has certainly has its issues relative to those. But I think what I've seen over the last 6 months particularly, is people not being willing to invest beyond themselves. And so whether that's their street or their neighborhood or their school district or whatever that case may be, they're not, unless they can see the direct benefit and correlate it to their lives and some return on investment for them personally, they're not willing to do that. And I think that's different. At least that's different for Charlotte, because we have built a large city generally with support from all parts of town. We're not seeing that now.
Do you think that goes back to the debate in the late 70s and 80s about going from an at-large type of city council to more of a district and a ward type of? I mean, that was very hotly contested for a while.
It was. I don't think that's part of the issue. As you know, we have 7 districts, 4 at large, and then the mayor elected separately. And I don't really see any tug of war between at large and district and the mayor. I don't think that's really a factor. But it's more the inability of each of us individually to look beyond our own immediate concerns, and that's different.
Yeah. Ed, let's change tax here. Tax, we have about 5 minutes left. In Spartanburg, you were a proponent for setting up a $100,000 innovation fund to cause your staff and employees in the city to think differently. You know, here, we're going to reward you, but we want you to come with some great ideas. What can we do different about service? How can we raise revenue and drop costs? How do we do that? How is that working, and what kind of, has it caught on?
Well, it's early in the program. We're early in the fiscal year, and we wanted to build something that was employee-driven largely in terms of work teams that may go across departmental lines.
And what's the head count in city staff and
380 full-time employees.
So you've got a critical mass that you can really do some things
right. And
with.
Again, this is a fairly small amount of potential employee incentives. These are certainly of a monetary nature, but they're more about helping install a culture of innovation, some appropriate risk-taking that we would like to see employees engage in, and also working what have been in some respects silos, what I refer to as silos, where one team is not really concerned, one work team is not necessarily concerned about the challenges or the difficulties we may be having in another part of our team, and we really want to function across those lines sometimes. And then so this is the approach that we're taking. This is a small step in what I hope will be a larger move over the next several years, but I think that to encourage that approach and philosophy was important. That was an important step that management wanted to take and start rewarding and being able to tangibly reward the employees that were buying into that.
Is it having the effect even in the early?
Again, it's early. We're still talking about an organization, a culture. This is only one component of an effort that we will engage, and I'm encouraged to what we're seeing and how our teams are working. We're smaller. I think we're smarter than we were just a few years ago in our approach. We've done things drastically different. For instance, in our public works department, we have gone to automated unsorted recycling. I like to think we have one of the best recycling programs in the state, if not the Southeast. We have high levels of participation in that. That took some change. And our employees embraced it. It became difficult. There was some difficult downsizing associated with some of the changes.
So, Richard, and we got about a minute and a half left. How do you change from the inside out? How do you force some of the things that you'd like to see happen in the wider community? How do you use your staff to do that?
We get everybody in the same room at the same time, talk about what we're going to be doing. We also have focus groups and bring the community in. We just recently updated our strategic plan.
And I'm sorry, let me interrupt you again, and I hate to keep doing this, but you don't think of the city staff as being, the core and the center for creative thinking. So I guess back to Ed.
But they have been. That's the whole point. I mean, for example, so many times in government, it's easy to say, well, let's just buy that car. It's under state contract. And it's like our folks are saying, no, that's our starting point. Let's take the state contract and go out and see what we can get competitive bids on. And that's a change in psyche.
Yeah.
And I have to echo what Ed's saying. And we have a recycling program too, Ed. But look, the point is when folks know they will be heard, not that you're going to go with what they say, but they will be heard.
It's transformative.
It's amazing the talent pool out there.
Yeah.
You think you've got somebody who runs the recycle truck, but you've got somebody who's a woodworker, who can help you with the project you're doing.
We've got to cut you off. We're out of time. I can tell you all are excited about that. Thank you for being on the program. Nice to see you all.
Chris.
Thank you for watching. Until next week, I'm Chris William, and we certainly hope all your business is good. Good night. Sorry, guys, that wasn't fair.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle-market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant Health, including Presbyterian in Charlotte and Forsyth in Winston-Salem, are affiliate heart hospitals of the Cleveland Clinic, consistently ranked #1 in the nation for heart care. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, proudly serving South Carolinians since 1946. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.